My mother-in-law waited until the chicken was carved and the champagne was poured before she decided to destroy me. That's the part that still plays in my head on a loop, the timing. Not when we walked in, not when she hugged me at the door with that stiff, perfumed embrace and said, "You look nice," like it hurt her teeth. Not when she clinked her glass and announced to the table that we were finally making it official, like our engagement was a corporate merger she'd been forced to approve. No, she waited for the moment everyone's plates were full and nobody could pretend they hadn't heard her. The dining room looked like a magazine spread. White linen, glittering crystal, the long dark table his family had eaten at for 3 generations. His parents' house in Buckhead is the kind of place people drive by slowly just to stare. Tall white columns, manicured hedges, a driveway that curves like it's making a point. I remember thinking, the first time he brought me here, that it looked like a set from a movie, where girls like me only appear as background. Tonight, I was supposed to be the leading lady. That's what Andre said when he zipped up my dress in our tiny apartment bathroom. "You look like somebody's wife," he murmured, kissing my shoulder. My wife. I believed him. I believed him enough to spend 2 hours on my hair, smoothing my curls into something his mother wouldn't call unprofessional. I believed him enough to put on the pale pink lipstick she'd once called classy on your skin tone instead of the dark berry I liked. I believed him enough to bring a homemade peach cobbler because, you know, my mom thinks store-bought desserts are tacky, baby. Just help me out tonight. So I walked in carrying my grandmother's recipe in a glass dish, trying to balance it in one hand while I shrugged off my coat with the other. His mother didn't offer to take it. She just looked at it, then at me, and said, "Oh, you cook." Like it was a plot twist. "Yes, ma'am," I said, smiling. "My grandma taught me. I thought I'd bring something special." She nodded slowly, that tight, polite expression that never reaches her eyes. "We'll see how it turns out," she said. "Andre's used to a certain standard." Later, I would replay that line and realize she meant a standard I didn't come from. But in that moment, I just followed her into the dining room, my dish warm in my hands, my heart warm in my chest, pretending not to notice the way her friend's eyes skimmed over me, like I was an unexpected ingredient in their favorite recipe. Dinner started off civil. His father asked about my job, the way people ask about the weather. "You're still at the clinic, right?" "Yes, sir," I said. "I'm a patient educator. We just launched a new program for Black maternal health out in—" His mother cut in with a laugh. "She gives out pamphlets and such," she said to the table. "Very sweet, very community-minded." I let the sentence die in my throat. I could feel Andre's foot tap my ankle under the table, his silent, "Let it go, babe," Morse code. Across from me, one of her friends smiled, brittle and curious. "And your family?" she asked. "They're from here?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Decatur. My mom's a nurse, my dad works for MARTA. My grandmother." Another friend murmured, eyebrows lifting just enough. His mother sipped her wine. "Andre's father's family has been in Buckhead since before he was born," she said lightly. "Different upbringing." "Mom," Andre said, a warning edge in his voice. "What?" she said innocently. "We're just talking." We weren't. They were cataloging me, zip code, job, skin, hair, all of it. Measuring me against some invisible checklist I was never meant to pass. Still, I smiled. I smiled when they asked if my parents understood our lifestyle. I smiled when his mother said, "I suppose your side will want to play that music at the wedding?" with a little shudder, like bass was a disease. I smiled when she looked at my ring and said, "Well, it's not what I imagined for Andre's fiancé, but you do make it look nice." Andre squeezed my knee under the table each time, his eyes saying, "Please, baby, just tonight." I told myself I could take it. I told myself this was just her being old school, like he always said. I told myself that once we were married, once she saw how happy he was, she'd soften. Then dessert came. Andre had bragged about my cobbler earlier, trying to make conversation. Tasha makes the best one you've ever had, he'd told his father. Way better than that place you order from. His mother had given a tight smile, then ordered their usual from the catering service anyway. So the table was lined with options. My cobbler at one end, a perfect glossy lemon tart from some French bakery at the other. Naturally, she took a bite of the tart first. She said loudly. Now this is what I call dessert. One of her friends laughed. Of course, you always have the best taste. His mother dabbed her lips with a linen napkin, then, almost as an afterthought, let her fork scratch the edge of my cobbler. A small bite. A pause. The entire table seemed to hold its breath, as if we were all waiting on the same verdict. She chewed, swallowed, tilted her head. It's fine, she said at last. Sweet, a little heavy. She smiled that smile that always feels like a slap. But I suppose it's familiar, right, Tasha? Your family must be used to this kind of thing. I felt heat climb up my neck. My grandma used to make it every Sunday, I said quietly. It was her way of bringing everyone together. She hummed. Well, some families have recipes, others have standards. The word hung there, heavy, ugly. Andre shifted beside me. Mom, he said again, more firmly, come on. She set her fork down with a little click that silenced him more efficiently than any shout. I'm just being honest, she said, sitting a little straighter. You brought us here tonight to talk about a future, Andre, about marriage, about our name, and I think honesty is important, don't you? My stomach tightened. I don't understand, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Honest about what? That's when she looked at me. Really looked. Not at my dress or my hair or the ring on my finger, but at me. Like she was about to deliver a diagnosis. About whether you're a match, she said. For this family, for my son. The room seemed to tilt. I heard the clink of cutlery stopping. Even the music from the living room sounded far away. Mom, don't do this, Andre said, his voice low. Not like this. Then when, she snapped, her mask slipping for the first time, after he's already married her, after there are children involved and it's too late to say what everyone is thinking? I swallowed. My hands had gone icy around my napkin. What is everyone thinking? I asked, hearing the tremor in my own voice and hating it. She folded her hands neatly on the table, as if we were in a board meeting. That you're a lovely girl, she said. Truly, sweet, pretty, hard-working, I'm sure. You've come a long way. But this family, our family, has built a certain life, a certain reputation. Andre has a legacy to protect, a future to consider. I work, I said, a little too fast. I have my own income, my own. It's not about money, she cut in, though that matters too. It's, her gaze slid over my dark brown skin, my curls, the simple gold bracelet my mother had given me. Everything. No one spoke. Not her husband, not her friends, not Andre. You're not good enough for my son, she said, finally dropping the velvet from the knife. You're not our kind of people. And if no one else is brave enough to say it, then I will. Something in me cracked. I felt the words like a physical blow, like somebody had reached across the table and slapped me. I heard a rushing in my ears, like the ocean in a shell. I think someone gasped. Andre's hand moved toward mine and then stopped, halfway, like he couldn't decide which side to be on. I love him, I heard myself say. My voice sounded small to my own ears. We love each other. Isn't that enough? Her eyes softened, not with kindness, but with pity. Love is a start, she said, but marriage is more than feelings, dear. It's bloodlines. It's stability. It's making sure our grandchildren are brought up right, surrounded by the right people, the right influences. Her friends nodded, slow and solemn, like a jury. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My eyes burned. I blinked, blinked again, willing the tears not to fall. Not here, not in front of them. Andre finally spoke. "Mom, that's enough," he said. But it was weak, more plea than command. She barely looked at him. "You asked me to be honest," she said. "I am. She's fine, for now, but she's not what I imagined for you. And I will not sit here and pretend otherwise. You could do better. Not good enough, not what I imagined. You could do better." I don't remember how dessert ended. I don't remember if anyone actually ate my cobbler after that. I remember staring at the tablecloth, at the tiny embroidered leaves, trying to count them so I wouldn't burst into tears. I remember my fork shaking in my hand. I remember Andre saying, "Tasha, let's just finish dinner, we can talk in the car." Like I was a child throwing a tantrum over broccoli instead of a woman being told to her face that she was a mistake. I excused myself to the bathroom as calmly as I could. My legs felt like they weren't attached to my body. In the mirror, under the soft, flattering lights her designer had probably chosen personally, I saw a 30-something black woman in a careful dress, lipstick still perfect, mascara about to betray her. My own face blurred as the tears finally broke free. "You're not good enough for my son." I leaned on the marble sink and let myself cry, quietly, shoulders shaking, because there is nothing quite like being told, in a room full of people, that the best of you will never be enough for the worst of them. At that moment, I believed her. I didn't know yet that a few weeks later, a thin white envelope with a lab logo on it would land on their dining table, and that one cold sheet of paper would rip her entire idea of good enough to shreds. I didn't leave that night. That's the part I still feel ashamed of when I'm honest with myself. I splashed cold water on my face in that marble bathroom, pressed a tissue into my eyes until the redness faded, and then I walked back out there like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been told, in front of a table full of people, that I was an insult to their son. Andre met me halfway down the hall. His eyes were wide, guilty, like a kid caught between two parents. "Hey," he whispered, fingers brushing my arm. "You okay?" "No." "Yeah," I said, "I'm fine." "Tasha, can we just finish dinner?" I said. My voice sounded thin even to me. "I don't want to give her a show." He winced, because we both knew that was what his mother was hoping for. A scene she could hold up later as proof. "Look how emotional she is. Look how dramatic." Not our kind of people. So we went back to the table. The rest of the meal was a blur of clinking silverware and small talk about the stock market, a charity gala, someone's new lake house. No one mentioned what had just happened. No one said, "That was out of line," or "I'm sorry you had to hear that." They just pretended it was normal. Normal for a 34-year-old woman to sit quietly, while the mother of the man she loves declared her unworthy. When we finally got into Andre's car, my body did what it had wanted to do all night. It folded in on itself. I turned my face toward the window and just breathed. He pulled out of the driveway in silence, the big white columns shrinking in the rearview mirror. "Baby," he said finally, "you know she didn't mean it like that." I laughed once, sharp and ugly. What other way is there to mean, "You're not good enough for my son"? He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "She's old-fashioned. She cares about appearances. She wants the best for me. She doesn't know you like I do." "She doesn't want to know me," I said. "That's the point." He sighed. "Can you just give her time? You know how she is. She'll come around once she sees we're serious." She saw the ring, Andre. She saw we're serious. That's when she decided to say it. He didn't answer. The orange glow of the streetlights slid across his face, carving out the lines I knew by heart. I wanted him to pull over, turn toward me, say, "She was wrong. I should have defended you. I won't let anyone talk to you like that again." Instead, he said, "It's been a long night. Let's not fight, okay?" So, we didn't fight that night. We did something worse. We swallowed it. And that became the pattern. The campaign didn't look like screaming matches or slammed doors. It looked like 1,000 tiny cuts, spaced just far enough apart that they could be excused as jokes or misunderstandings. At brunch with her friends. "Oh, Tasha, you're still wearing your hair like that? I thought you might straighten it for the engagement photos. The curls are cute, but they're a lot." At the bridal boutique, "This dress is beautiful on you. If we cinch the waist a bit more, it'll give you more of that Grace Kelly silhouette." Classic, not so Instagram. At our apartment on speakerphone, "I heard your cousin DJ'd a party last weekend. Just be careful. We don't want our wedding to feel like a club." Every time, Andre would say the same thing. "That's just how she talks. She doesn't mean anything by it. Can you please not make everything about race and class? It's exhausting." He didn't mean to choose her side, but when you're the one asking for peace, and I'm the one being asked to swallow myself, the side is already chosen. I started changing without even realizing it. I caught myself editing my sentences at dinner, smoothing out my slang, using the long words I'd learned in health policy meetings, so I sounded educated enough. I wore more beige and navy and less color when we were invited to his parents' house. I stopped mentioning my dad's job at MARTA and just said city employee. I laughed off comments about your side of the family, like they didn't sting. The first time she saw my mom in person, at a venue visit, she turned on a version of herself I'd never seen. A brittle, practiced politeness she reserved for people she couldn't openly disrespect. "Mrs. Reed, it's so nice to finally meet you," she said, lips pressed into a tight smile. "Andre's told us so much about your hard work." My mom, in her simple church dress and comfortable shoes, smiled that soft, kind smile that had gotten me through childhood. "He's a good man," she said. "You raised him well." I saw my MIL's eyes flick over my mother's hands, noticing the worn knuckles, the plain wedding band, the faint calluses from years of lifting patience. Her own diamonds flashed as she adjusted her bracelet. "We've done our best," she said. "You know how it is. You work hard so your children can marry up." The words hung there. My mother's smile didn't falter, but I saw it, the tiny flicker in her eyes. She heard it. She understood exactly what was being said without being said. Later, in the car, my mom reached across the console and took my hand. "Baby," she said quietly. "Are you sure?" I swallowed. "Sure about what?" "About tying yourself to people who look at you like that," she said. "You know you are enough exactly as you are, right? You don't have to spend the rest of your life proving it to people who built their whole personality on being better than somebody." I should have listened to her. Instead, I did what daughters do when they've spent their whole lives trying not to worry their mothers. I smiled and said, "It'll be fine, Mama. She'll come around. Andre loves me." "At least one of them better," she muttered, but she let it go. The more his mother chipped away at me, the more I started chipping away at myself. I stopped inviting Andre to family cookouts because I didn't want to see his mother's face in my head, judging my uncle's loud laugh or my cousin's tattoos. I said no to a promotion at the clinic that would have required longer hours because his mother had already told me a wife's first job is her home. "Andre will need you to be available." I pretended I didn't notice when she accidentally left me off a group chat about wedding planning. And then came the conversations about children. It started as little comments. "When you two have kids, we'll make sure they go to the right schools," she said one evening, swirling wine in her glass. "They'll need to be around the right crowd early so they don't pick up bad habits." At another dinner, after she'd had just enough to drink, to be honest, she leaned in and said, "You know, mixed children are so beautiful. All the best features, as long as they're raised properly." I felt my stomach clench. "They'll be our children," I said, "not a project." She smiled, slow and patronizing. "Of course, dear. I'm just saying we have a legacy to think about. Our bloodline has standards. We don't just let anyone in." There it was again. Bloodline. Our. In. Out. I went home that night and lay awake staring at the ceiling. Andre snoring softly beside me. Somewhere under all the hurt and humiliation, something small and stubborn was starting to wake up, a sliver of anger that wasn't sad anymore, just sharp. A voice that whispered, "Why is her definition of good enough the only one that counts?" But I shoved it down. I told myself I could win her over. If I was kind enough, patient enough, perfect enough, she'd have to see it eventually. She'd have to admit she was wrong about me. So, when I missed my period 2 months later, when that plus sign bloomed purple on the plastic stick in our bathroom, the first emotion I felt wasn't fear or panic. It was hope. Hope that a grandchild would finally soften her. Hope that blood, the thing she seemed to worship so much, would make me impossible to ignore. Hope that if I carried part of her son's DNA inside my body, she might finally look at me and see more than a girl from the other side of town. I told Andre first, of course. He lifted me off my feet and spun me around our tiny kitchen, both of us laughing and crying. For a few days, it was just us and the secret miracle between us. Then we told his parents. His father blinked, then smiled. "Well," he said, clapping Andre on the shoulder, "that's big news." My mother-in-law's first reaction wasn't a smile. It was a pause. Her eyes went narrowed and calculating for a second before she arranged her face into something like delight. "Oh," she said, "a baby. How fast." I felt my heart dip, just a little. "We weren't exactly planning it this way," Andre said, grinning proudly. "But we're happy. We wanted you to be the first to know." She hugged him first, long and tight. When she turned to me, the embrace was shorter, colder, her hands barely touching my shoulders. "Congratulations," she said. "Let's just hope everything turns out right." I told myself I misheard the emphasis on right. I told myself the chill in her hug was just shock. I told myself now she'd have to accept me. I didn't know yet that the baby in my belly wasn't going to bring this family together. It was going to expose exactly how broken they already were, and that the first person she'd question wouldn't be her son. It would be me. The first time my mother-in-law said the word test, I thought she meant the glucose test. We were sitting in her sunroom, that glass-walled shrine to her own taste, white wicker chairs, pale blue cushions, a view of her manicured garden like something out of a magazine. She'd insisted we come over to talk about the baby. Andre was at work. It was just the two of us and a pot of herbal tea she didn't drink. I had one hand on my belly, still flat, but different somehow. I was 10 weeks along. I was starting to talk to the little cluster of cells inside me at night, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. You will be wanted. You will be loved. You will know where you belong. "So," she said, stirring her tea even though she hadn't added anything, "have you done all the tests yet?" I smiled, thinking about the pamphlet from my OB. "We did blood work last week. First ultrasound is in 2 weeks. They'll do the genetic screening later in the second trimester. It's optional, but with my work at the clinic, I figured." "I don't mean those tests," she said. I felt my stomach dip. "Oh, what do you mean?" She set the spoon down with a little tap, then folded her hands on the table like she was about to negotiate a contract. "Tasha, dear," she said, "you do realize there are more modern ways to make sure everything is as it should be, especially with these situations." "What situations?" I asked, even though I already knew. She gave me that patient smile. "Unexpected pregnancies, hasty engagements, couples from different worlds. There can be confusion, doubt." She tilted her head. "And doubt isn't good for a baby or a marriage." Heat crept up my neck. "There is no doubt," I said. "Andre and I live together. We've been together for 3 years. There's no confusion about whose child this is." She sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Tasha, be sensible. You can't blame people for asking questions. The timing is tight, and you know how things look. You must think of appearances. There's a difference, I said, my voice tight, between appearances and accusing me of cheating on your son. I'm not accusing you of anything, she said smoothly. I'm saying if you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to fear. A simple DNA test would put everyone's mind at ease. Andre's, his father's. She paused, then added softly, mine. The way she said mine made me want to flip the table. Instead, I swallowed. Andre's mind is already at ease, I said. He trusts me. Her eyebrows rose, just slightly. Does he? She asked. Or does he just say he does, because he doesn't want to fight? Men like Andre, they don't always say what they truly feel. They carry things quietly. For years, she let that hang in the air like cigarette smoke. You can prevent that, she continued. One little test, one little piece of paper, and this nasty little question. She flicked her fingers like flicking lint, disappears forever. I stared at her. You want me to get a paternity test while I'm still pregnant? There are safe, non-invasive versions now, she said quickly, like she'd rehearsed this. They just draw blood. I did some research. It's all very standard now. Our friend's daughter did one last year. Her husband's family insisted, of course. Of course, I said, my throat burning. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Look at it this way, Tasha. If you truly love my son, you'll want to remove any shadow over his first child, over his future, over our family name. There it was again. Our name, our family. As if I was just a shadow hanging off the edge of their picture. I left that day shaking. I called Andre from the parking lot, breathing too fast. She wants a paternity test, I blurted as soon as he answered. He was quiet for a beat. What? A prenatal DNA test, I said. She did research. She says if I have nothing to hide, I shouldn't have a problem with it. He cursed under his breath. I'm calling her. Don't, I said quickly. She'll just spin it and somehow make me the hysterical one. Again. Then I'll go over there. And do what? I snapped, more sharply than I meant to. Ask her nicely to stop accusing me of sleeping around? Silence. I sagged against the steering wheel, tears stinging. I'm sorry, I said. I'm just tired. He sighed. Look, baby, I know my mom. Once she gets an idea in her head, she doesn't let it go. If this is what it takes to shut her up... He trailed off. My chest tightened. You can't be serious. I am serious about you, he said quickly. About us. I don't doubt you for a second. You know that. But if one test gets her off your back forever, is it really that big a deal? There it was, the soft betrayal. Not a knife, just a steady pressure pushing me toward the edge. You realize what you're asking me to agree to, right? I said. You're asking me to prove to your mother that I'm not a liar. I'm asking you to help me manage her, he said, sounding tired. Do you think I enjoy this? Do you think I want to hear her talk about bloodlines and our name every time I see her? Then tell her to stop, I said. Tell her no. Tell her your wife is not going to be treated like a suspect. He was quiet for a beat too long. She's my mom, he said finally. I can't just cut her off, Tasha. Not over a test that, objectively, is just information. That will prove you right. Objectively. I pressed my fingers into my eyes. I thought about my mom, who had never asked to see proof of anything Andre said he'd do. I thought about the women at the clinic, the ones whose partners demanded proof of loyalty before they'd buy diapers. I thought about my child, who hadn't even been born yet and already lived in a world where their mother's word wasn't enough. Let me think about it, I said. My voice felt like it belonged to someone else. I have to go. I'm at the store. I hung up before he could answer. For 3 days, I went back and forth. My mother was furious when I told her. Absolutely not, she said. They don't get to spit on your character and call it peace. If Andre can't stand up to his mama now, when is he going to learn? When she's telling you how to raise your baby? When she's counting how many nights you visit her? My best friend Samira just looked at me over her coffee cup and said, "You know, a man really loves you when he's willing to be uncomfortable for you. You shouldn't be the only one bleeding for this relationship." They were right. I knew they were right. But there was another part of me, small, petty, wounded, that whispered something else. Let them get their little test. Let science slap them harder than your words ever could. On the fourth day, I woke up with my stomach churning, not from morning sickness, but from the feeling of being trapped. I stood in the shower until the water went lukewarm, one hand on my belly. "Okay," I whispered to the life inside me. "If they want to play with DNA, we'll let DNA talk." I called Andre. "I'll do it," I said, "on one condition." "Anything," he said, too quickly. "You come with me," I said. "Every appointment, every needle stick, every result. And you look your mother in the eye, and you tell her you were wrong to ask me for this. Not me, you." He exhaled. "Done," he said. "We'll schedule it today." The clinic we ended up at wasn't my usual OB. His mother insisted on a private lab our friends use, the kind of place with gray walls, chrome accents, and a receptionist who said concierge service like a password. She insisted on coming. "I'm paying for it," she said briskly. "I have a right to be there." "You can sit in the waiting room," I said. "You're not going in the room when they take my blood." Her lips thinned, but she didn't argue. The waiting area smelled like disinfectant and expensive perfume. A TV in the corner played muted footage of a talk show about blended families. I sat between Andre and his mother, feeling like a rope in a tug of war. When they called our names, a nurse led us down a hallway lined with doors, each with a frosted glass panel and a discreet silver number. Inside the exam room, a woman in a white coat introduced herself as Dr. Patel. Her voice was calm, practiced. "So," she said, glancing at the chart, "non-invasive prenatal paternity test. You're about 10 weeks?" 10.5, I said. "Good. We can get a clear read from maternal blood and a paternal cheek swab at this stage. I'll explain the consent forms and what we do with the samples." She walked us through it in gentle, precise language. They'd draw my blood, collect Andre's DNA with a cotton swab inside his cheek, send both to the lab, isolate the fetal DNA from my bloodstream, compare markers. "It's very straightforward," she said. "Do either of you have questions?" "I do," my mother-in-law said from the corner. She'd invited herself into the exam room just while we talk, and I hadn't had the energy to fight. "How accurate is this? We don't want any gray areas." "Over 99% with this method," Dr. Patel said. "We're looking for specific genetic markers inherited from the biological father." "You see?" my mother-in-law said, turning to Andre. "This is good. This is clarity." Dr. Patel glanced between us, reading the tension like a chart. Her eyes softened slightly as they met mine. "Just to confirm," she said gently, "you're all clear on why you're doing this? In informed consent, everyone's comfort matters." I swallowed. "I'm clear," I said. "I want this over with." She nodded, not pushing. "All right, one more thing," she added, flipping a page. "I see here, Mr. Coleman, that we have some prior genetic information on file from you." Andre frowned. "You do? I've never been here before." "You may not have," she said, "but this lab processes panels for several practices in the city. It looks like you did a basic ancestry and carrier screening panel a few years ago. For life insurance or premarital screening, maybe. The ordering physician was Dr. Jameson." Andre's mother stiffened in her chair so sharply I heard the wicker creak. "That was for his father's company," she said quickly. "They had some sort of wellness initiative. It's not important." Dr. Patel smiled politely, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. "It's actually useful," she said. "It means we already have a complete profile to cross-reference. Sometimes, when we see discrepancies in self-reported family history, we recommend a deeper panel, for the baby's sake." "Discrepancies?" I repeated. She flipped through the file, brow furrowing slightly. "It could be a typo," she said quickly. "I don't want to worry you. It's just, you listed a family history of a recessive blood disorder on the paternal side. but the markers in your previous panel don't match that lineage. Again, it could be an error, or it could mean, we don't need all that. His mother cut in sharply. We're here for one thing, paternity. That's all. We don't want any extra digging. The word digging hung there. Dr. Patel looked at her for a long moment, then back at Andre. Ultimately, it's your choice, she said, but accurate family medical history can be important. Andre shifted on the exam table. What does it mean? He asked slowly. If the markers don't match. It could mean, she said carefully, that somewhere in your recorded family line, there was an unreported change, an adoption, a non-paternity event, a misattributed relationship. It happens more often than people think. The room went very still. My mother-in-law's hand tightened around the strap of her handbag until her knuckles went white. We are not here to question our family, she said, her voice brittle. Our history is quite clear. We just want to confirm that this baby is Andre's, that is all. Dr. Patel hesitated, then nodded. All right, she said. We'll proceed with the paternity test only. If you change your mind about the expanded panel, we can add it later. She moved on, explaining the consent forms. But I barely heard her. Non-paternity event, misattributed relationship, unreported change. My gaze slid to Andre's mother. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked afraid. Not of me, not of what I might have done, but of what a lab might reveal about her. A strange calm settled over me as the nurse tied a rubber tourniquet around my arm and searched for a vein. The sting of the needle barely registered. If they wanted science, they were going to get all of it, not just the part that pointed at me. The results came in on a Wednesday. I remember that because Wednesdays were my long days at the clinic. Pap smears, vaccinations, blood pressure checks, a blur of lives moving through my exam rooms. I just finished reassuring an anxious teenager that no, one missed period didn't mean her life was over, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. Private lab, results ready. Please call to schedule in-person review. In person. For a second, the floor seemed to tilt under my feet. Most tests, they just upload to the portal. You get a spiral little PDF and a note that says, your provider will contact you with any concerns. In person meant one of two things. Something was wrong, or something was complicated. Everything okay? My charge nurse asked, pausing in the doorway with a stack of charts. I don't know yet, I said. Cover room 4 for me. I need 5 minutes. I locked myself in the staff bathroom and called Andre. They want us to come in, I said, skipping hello. Okay, he said slowly. Did they say why? No, I said, just that they prefer in person for this type of result. He was quiet for a beat. It's probably just protocol, he said. They said it was complicated, right? All that fetal DNA isolation stuff? They probably just want to explain it. Probably, I echoed, staring at myself in the mirror. My own eyes looked too big, the skin under them shadowed. Can you meet me there after work? Yeah, he said immediately. Text me the time. I'll tell my mom when it's done. My throat tightened. She doesn't need to be there, I said. This is about me and you, our baby. Of course, he said. I'll handle it. He didn't. When we walked into the lab's waiting room at 5:30, she was already there, sitting ramrod straight in a cream blazer, pearls at her throat like armor. She stood when she saw us. I called to check on the timing, she said, as if that explained everything. They said you'd be here at 5:30. I assume you don't mind if I'm present for something this important. I do mind, I said. Mom, Andre said quickly, stepping between us just enough to count as intervening without actually doing anything. We talked about this. This is between me and Tasha. She smiled that thin smile that never reached her eyes. And your child, she said. My grandchild, my concern. Before I could respond, the door opened and Dr. Patel appeared, still in her white coat, her expression professionally neutral. Hi, Tasha, she said. Andre, Mrs. Coleman. Of course she remembered her name. If you'll all come with me, she continued, we can go over the report. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say just us. but I was tired. Tired of fighting alone. Tired of always being the one to make a scene. So I followed her down the hallway and into the same small exam room, my mother-in-law's perfume trailing behind us like a cloud. Dr. Patel closed the door and sat on her rolling stool, a folder in her hand. She looked at me first, not at Andre, not at his mother. That small act of respect steadied me. "Before we begin," she said gently, "I want to remind you both that you are my patients in this context, Tasha as the pregnant parent and Andre as the alleged father. My obligation is to be honest and clear with you, even if some of this is emotionally complex. Okay?" Emotionally complex. My mother-in-law shifted in her chair. "Doctor, with all due respect, we don't need a speech. We just need a yes or no." Dr. Patel didn't look at her. She opened the folder and slid out a printed report with highlighted sections. "Let's start with the straightforward part," she said. "We were able to isolate sufficient fetal DNA from your blood sample, Tasha, and compare it to Andre's buccal swab." My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my gums. "The statistical probability that Andre is the biological father of this fetus is greater than 99.9%, she said calmly. "For all practical and legal purposes, the test confirms paternity." For a split second, the world went silent. Then sound crashed back in, my own breath rushing out, Andre's sharp exhale, the squeak of my mother-in-law's chair as she jerked back like someone had slapped her. "Oh," she said, recovering quickly. "Well, good. We can put this unpleasantness behind us now." She said it like the unpleasantness had been the question, not the asking. I should have let it go there. Should have taken my little scrap of vindication and walked out. But Dr. Patel didn't close the folder. "And," she continued, her voice shifting into that careful register I recognized from having given bad news myself, "as I mentioned at your last visit, we cross-referenced a previous genetic panel we have on file for Andre. In the process of verifying markers for this test, we reran some of those analyses." Andre frowned. "Why?" he asked. "I thought you said that was from some old insurance thing." "It was," she said. "But when we run a prenatal paternity test, we have to be absolutely certain that the paternal profile we're using is accurate. So if there's any discrepancy in the record, we double-check." "Discrepancy," I repeated. The word tasted metallic. Patel hesitated, then turned the page around so it faced Andre. "I want to be clear," she said. "This does not affect the result we just discussed. You are this baby's biological father. Full stop." My chest eased a fraction. "But in reviewing your previous panel," she went on, tapping a highlighted line, "we found something that doesn't match your reported family history." My mother-in-law's fingers tightened on her handbag. "We already discussed this," she said sharply. "We don't want any of that extra." Dr. Patel's gaze flicked to her, then back to Andre. "I understand this may be uncomfortable," she said. "But Mr. Coleman, this is your health information. You have a right to hear it." Andre swallowed. "Just tell me," he said. "What does it say?" She took a breath. "The markers in your genome that should match your paternal line don't," she said softly. "Specifically, the Y chromosome haplotype we see in your profile is inconsistent with the one we'd expect based on the documented ancestry you gave us last time." He blinked. "Inconsistent how?" "In plain language," she said, "it strongly suggests that the man you've always believed is your biological father is not genetically related to you." The room went deathly still. I heard the air leave Andre's lungs in a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. My own stomach dropped, hand flying instinctively to my belly. My mother-in-law made a small choking noise. "That's absurd," she snapped. "My husband is his father. He signed the birth certificate. They have the same kids. Not genetically related to you." Dr. Patel said quickly, "I'm not disputing that. I'm only telling you what the genetic markers show." There is a high likelihood of what we call a misattributed paternity event in the previous generation. She turned another page, revealing a small boxed section at the bottom, highlighted in yellow. I leaned forward, my eyes catching on the bolded words. Paternal markers inconsistent with reported paternal line. Recommend genetic counseling, confirmatory testing of alleged paternal father, if clinically indicated. This is nonsense, his mother hissed. Her face had gone a blotchy, furious red I'd never seen before. Your machines are wrong, or your records. We will not sit here and let you insult our family like this. Mrs. Coleman, Dr. Patel said evenly. Genetics isn't an insult. It just is. These findings are not as rare as people think. Family stories don't always match biological reality, for all kinds of reasons. Adoption, infidelity, assault, donor conception. All I'm saying is that the genetic evidence doesn't line up with the narrative on file. What your family chooses to do with that information is up to you. I choose to ignore it, she snapped. We will not be needing any counseling. We came for one answer, and we have it. Andre is the father. That's all that matters. Is it? I asked quietly. All three of them looked at me like they'd forgotten I was in the room. I stared at the report, at the neat rows of numbers and letters, the clinical language that had just detonated 30-plus years of his family mythology. My mother-in-law, who had spent months lecturing me about bloodlines and legacies and our name, was sitting 3 feet away from a piece of paper that said the bloodline she worshipped wasn't what she thought it was. How long have you known? I heard myself ask her. Her head snapped toward me. Excuse me? You heard the doctor, I said. My voice didn't sound like it belonged to someone who'd cried in a bathroom after being told she wasn't good enough. It sounded cold. This panel isn't new. It was done years ago for that company initiative. Did you see this then? She opened her mouth, closed it again. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely rattled. I don't have to answer that, she said finally. This is private family business. Andre's eyes were on her now, not on me, not on the doctor, on his mother. Mom? He said very quietly. Did you know? Something flickered across her face. Guilt, fear, something older. Your father is your father, she said stiffly. He raised you. He paid for your schooling. He put his name on everything that matters. That's what counts. That's not what I asked, he said. His voice was shaking. Did you know he's not my biological father? Biology isn't everything, she said, too fast. This obsession with DNA? I laughed then. I couldn't help it. The sound came out sharp and startled all of us. Funny, I said. You didn't think it was just DNA when you were demanding proof that my baby belonged to your son. You threw around words like bloodline and our name like weapons. But when the same science points back at you, suddenly it's all stories don't matter and legal fatherhood. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. Dr. Patel looked between us, assessing the emotional wreckage. We can take a break, she offered gently. I can give you space. No, I said. I'm fine. I wasn't. But I was awake. Andre was staring down at the paper like, if he looked hard enough, he could make the letters rearrange themselves into something else. All this time, he whispered, all those speeches about carrying the family legacy, about being the firstborn son. And you knew? Tears glistened at the corners of his mother's eyes, but she blinked them back like they offended her. You don't understand, she said. You were a baby. It was complicated. We did what we had to do to protect this family's name. Oh, by lying about it? I asked. By building your whole identity on something that wasn't even true? Her gaze snapped to mine, full of hatred now, unmasked. You, she said. You did this. You and your little test. You brought this into our lives. I brought nothing, I said. You ordered a test to question my integrity. All it did was tell the truth. You just didn't know which truth it was going to pick. Dr. Patel slid the report back into the folder, closing it gently like a wound. I'm going to step out and give you a few minutes, she said softly. There's a counselor on staff if any of you want to talk next steps. Not medically, but emotionally. For the baby, there's no concern. Tasha, I'll have your OB follow up about the usual prenatal care. She stood, hand on the doorknob. For what it's worth, she added, meeting my eyes, I'm glad the paternity question is resolved. You shouldn't have had that hanging over you. For the first time since this started, I felt seen. Me too, I said. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving the three of us alone with the air thick and buzzing. Andre's mother went for the folder, but I was faster. My hand closed over it, knuckles white. This is my medical record, I said. My test. My baby. You don't get to decide what happens to it. She glared at me, eyes shining with a mix of fury and something that looked a lot like panic. You think this changes anything? She hissed. You think one little line on a piece of paper makes you my equal? I slipped the report into my bag, the paper crackling like a promise. No, I said quietly. I think it finally makes us honest. I stood up, my chair scraping the floor. For the first time since you told me I wasn't good enough for your son, I added, I'm starting to see exactly who isn't good enough for who. The look on her face in that moment wasn't just outrage. It was fear. Because she knew what I had now wasn't just vindication. It was leverage. And I had spent my whole life watching women like her use secrets as currency. She had no idea yet that I'd just discovered the one thing in this family more powerful than her disapproval. On the drive home from the lab, the car was so quiet I could hear the turn signal ticking like a metronome. Andre was gripping the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles looked bone white against his skin. His jaw was clenched, eyes fixed on the road. But I could tell he wasn't seeing any of it. He was replaying 30-plus years of his life in his head, looking for the moment it had all gone sideways. I knew that look. I'd worn it myself after his mother told me I wasn't good enough for her son. You can pull over, I said softly. I can drive. He shook his head once. If I stop right now, I'm not sure I'll start again. We rolled to a red light. The car idled. I watched his reflection in the windshield. The man who had sat there and let his mother dissect me, like a case study in failure. The man who had told me to be understanding because she's just old school. Now he looked small. Not like a boy, but like a man who suddenly realized he'd been standing on someone else's script his whole life. Andre, I said, look at me. He did, finally. His eyes were glassy, rimmed red in a way that made my chest ache, in spite of everything. Did you know? He asked, his voice low and raw. Did you ever suspect? I blinked. About your dad? No. How would I? He laughed once, humorless. Because apparently everybody knows something about my life except me. I could have comforted him, told him he was still the same person he was that morning, that DNA didn't erase who raised him. The nurse in me had that speech ready. But the woman who had sat at that fancy dining table and listened to his mother say, our family doesn't do divorces, when I cried about being called not good enough, she had something else she needed to say first. I'm sorry this is happening to you, I said. Really, but we need to talk about the fact that some of this is happening to us. His hands tightened again. Tasha, at that table, I cut in gently, when she said she wanted the test because our name couldn't be tied to any random child from your side of town, you didn't say a word. He flinched like I'd slapped him. But he didn't argue. She questioned my loyalty, my body, my baby, I continued, my voice shaking. She made it sound like I was some gold-digging stranger you dragged home from a club, and you just sat there. I was trying to keep the peace, he muttered. No, I said, you were trying to keep your mother comfortable. The light turned green. He didn't move. Cars honked behind us, swerving around, but neither of us cared. That day, you told me to let her talk because she's old school and she doesn't mean it like that. I shook my head. You let her build herself a throne on top of my humiliation. And then you expected me to serve her tea. He closed his eyes. For a moment I thought he might cry. But when he opened them again, what I saw was something else. Shame, yes. But also the beginnings of anger, aimed in the right direction for once. You're right, he said hoarsely. I failed you. I let her set the rules and told you to play nice. I thought if you just proved yourself to her, she'd come around. She was never going to come around, I said quietly. People who think they're royalty don't accept applications from the help. He winced again. Damn, he whispered. That's really how you see it? That's how she treats me, I replied. And you've let her. Until now. We sat there in the odd bubble of the idling car, the world streaming past. Do you hate me? He asked suddenly, the question pulled from somewhere deep. I took a breath. No, I said. But I don't trust your judgment when it comes to her. Not yet. He swallowed. What do you want me to do? There it was. The moment his mother thought would never come. The moment her son stopped asking, how do I keep mom happy? And started asking, how do I keep my wife? I thought about the crinkled report in my bag. About the line it said clearly, the bloodline she worshipped wasn't real. The irony burned and soothed at the same time. First, I said, I want you to sit with the fact that she didn't just hurt me. She lied to you for decades. She built your whole identity on a secret and never once thought you deserved the truth. His face twisted. She said she protected the family name, he muttered. But she didn't protect me. I feel fake, like everything I've tried to live up to was built on air. Then stop living up to it, I said. You get to decide what your name means now, not her. He stared at the steering wheel. And your leverage? He asked quietly. You planning to blow up the whole family with it? Use it against her? That was the question, wasn't it? I thought back to her face when Dr. Patel said the words, misattributed paternity. The way her fingers had twitched, like she wanted to snatch the paper and burn it. The terror in her eyes when she realized I had seen it too. She used my pain as entertainment, I said slowly. She turned my tears into a show for her church friends. Telling people I wasn't raised right enough. She called me trash to my face and then smiled for pictures. She dragged our marriage into her ego games and made my pregnancy about the purity of her bloodline. I turned to him fully. I'm not going to lie, I said. Part of me wants to watch her entire image burn down around her, to send anonymous copies of that report to every woman at her little charity luncheons. To stand up in church during testimony time and say, funny how Sister Coleman talks about generational blessings when even she doesn't know where hers come from. He huffed an unwanted laugh at that, the sound half choked. But that's the petty part of me, I added. And honestly, she's not worth my soul. He looked startled. So, what are you going to do? I rested a hand on my stomach. Our baby fluttered, a soft rolling inside, like they were answering to. I'm going to do what she never did, I said. I'm going to choose family over image. I'm not going to weaponize your hurt the way she weaponized mine. I will never use this to embarrass you. Relief flickered over his face, mixed with something like awe. Thank you, he whispered. But, I continued, I am also never ever letting her hold that fake bloodline over my head again. That era is over. The light turned red again. Still, we stayed. I want boundaries, Andre, I said firmly. Real ones, not we'll talk to her and then nothing changes. Here's what I need if this marriage is going to survive. He straightened a little, like he could feel the verdict coming. 1, I said, holding up a finger. You tell her tonight, in plain words, that the DNA test is conclusive. This is your child. This conversation is over. My fidelity is not up for debate ever again. Done. he said immediately. 2, I said. You tell her that any version of "you're not good enough for my son" ends today. If she says it again, if she disrespects me to my face or behind my back, she doesn't see us. She doesn't see this baby. Period. He nodded slowly. Okay. 3, I said. You tell her you know about the paternity finding. I'm not hiding that for her. She lied to you. That's between you and her now. But I will not be the only one in this marriage who's had to swallow ugly truths in silence. He went a little pale, but he didn't pull back. She's going to lose it, he murmured. She already lost the right to control the story when she dragged us into that lab for a spectacle, I said. I'm not asking you to scream at her. I'm asking you to stop protecting her from the consequences of her own choices. He breathed out, long and shaky. And what about telling my dad? I thought of Mr. Coleman, quiet, reserved, the kind of man who ironed his jeans and never raised his voice. I'd always wondered what he and his wife talked about behind closed doors. Maybe now I knew. Nothing honest. That's your call, I said softly. But I'll tell you this. If I found out 30 years from now that you'd known something this big about my life and never told me, I'd never forgive you. He swallowed hard. Nod. And 4, I added, surprising even myself, we go to therapy. Together. Not the free counsel at church, where the pastor tells us to honor our parents and pray over conflict. A real therapist. Someone who can help us untangle where your mother ends and you begin. He let out a breath that sounded almost like surrender. Okay, he said finally. Okay, I'll call tomorrow. We'll find someone. Andre, I said, my voice softening. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to build a life that isn't ruled by your mother's fear and pride. For us. For this baby. He turned his head, and for the first time since we left the lab, I saw something in his eyes other than shock. Determination. You're right, he said. She's been running my life so long I thought it was just weather. Something you endure. But this? He tapped the steering wheel, jaw setting. This is a storm she made, he said. And I've been helping her hold the umbrella while you got soaked? That stops now. We drove the rest of the way home in a different kind of silence. Not the stunned, brittle quiet of earlier, but a heavy, working quiet. The kind that comes when two people are rearranging furniture in their minds, figuring out what stays and what goes. That night, I watched him step out onto our tiny apartment balcony with his phone in his hand. I watched his shoulders tense, then slump, then square themselves again as he dialed his mother's number. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard enough. Mom, listen, he said. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. We are not doing another test. The one we did is final. This is my child. You will not question Tasha's integrity again. A pause. A shrill voice I recognized even through the glass. I don't care how you feel about it, he said, louder. I care about my wife and my baby. He turned slightly. Our eyes met through the sliding door. He didn't look away. And another thing, he said, voice dropping, the next sentence heavy, with 30 years of swallowed truth. We need to talk about Dad. I stepped back, leaving him his privacy. Did I want to be in on that conversation? A part of me did. The part of me that had been humiliated in that dining room wanted a front row seat to the collapse of her false kingdom. But the wiser part of me knew my revenge wasn't about watching her burn. It was about watching him finally step out of her shadow and into the light of his own adulthood. When he came back inside, his face was drawn, but clear. How did she take it? I asked. He laughed once, softly, like a woman who's been holding a dam with her bare hands for 30 years and just watched the first crack appear. He walked over, rested his forehead against mine. I can't fix everything she broke, he whispered. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you and this baby never have to bleed for her sins again. I believed him, not because he said the words, but because for the first time since we married, his loyalty wasn't divided between me and a woman who thought I was beneath her. It was pointed in one direction, home. And as much as that DNA test had exposed his mother's lie, it had also done something I hadn't expected. It forced my husband to choose what kind of man he really wanted to be. The next step, the one where his mother learned what it felt like to have her perfect bloodline questioned in front of an audience, that would come soon enough. The fallout didn't explode all at once, it cracked. First there was the phone call to his mother on our tiny balcony. Then, 2 days later, the visit to his father. Andre insisted on going alone, but when he came back I knew something had shifted forever. He dropped his keys in the bowl, slipped his shoes off like his bones hurt, and sat at the edge of the couch, staring at his hands. "How was it?" I asked quietly. He rubbed his face. He didn't yell, Andre said. Didn't even look surprised, just tired. "What did you say?" I told him about the test, he said, that the lab found something off with my profile, and that they recommended confirmatory testing. I asked him if there was anything I should know before we went down that road. And? Andre gave a hollow little laugh. He couldn't even look at me at first. He just kept staring at the TV, like it was on whatever. Then he said, "Your mother and I went through a rough patch before you were born. There were questions. We agreed it was better for everyone if we never asked." My heart clenched. Did he know there was a chance you weren't biologically his? He knew there was a chance, Andre said. He just chose to pretend there wasn't. Said he decided a long time ago that blood doesn't make a boy your son, raising him does. His voice cracked on that. He said, "I'm his, no matter what the test says." But he also looked broken, like 30 years of pretending finally caught up. "And your mother?" I asked. His jaw tightened. He said she swore it was a fling that meant nothing, that she begged him not to bring shame on the family. So he kept the secret, for her, not for me. We sat with that for a moment, the weight of a lie carried by the wrong person for the wrong reasons. "What are you going to do?" I asked. He took a breath. "I already did it," he said. I told him the truth about what she did to you. The not good enough comment, the test, all of it. He just shook his head and said, "That sounds like your mother." He swallowed. Then he said something I didn't expect. "What?" He said, "If I'd known what all my protecting her would cost you and your wife, I would have told you the truth years ago." Andre's eyes shone. "He told me to love you the way he should have insisted my mother love me, without conditions." But I felt my throat tighten. "He said that?" "Yeah," Andre nodded. Then he told me something else. "Son, secrets rot the house from the inside out. You can't raise a child on top of rot." That sentence stayed with me, because a week later, we found out just how far the rot had spread. It started with a text from my coworker Jasmine on a Sunday afternoon. "Girl, why some lady at my cousin church luncheon saying, 'Pray for my son,' his wife lying about a baby that ain't his. She just described you to a T. You okay?" I stared at the phone, nausea swirling. We hadn't seen his mother since the lab visit. Andre had laid down boundaries. She hung up on him twice, then switched to icy group texts about keeping the devil out of our household. I stupidly thought silence meant she backed off. She hadn't. She'd just taken the show on the road. I showed Andre the messages. His nostrils flared. "So she's still out here playing victim?" he said slowly. "After everything?" "Oh, it's worse than that," Jasmine wrote when I asked for details. She got up during the prayer requests and basically did a sermon about modern women trapping good men and how we need to restore purity to the family line. Folks clapped, Tasha. Clapped. Something in me snapped. It wasn't just that she was lying. It was that she was doing it in the name of God in a room full of women who looked like me, weaponizing religion and tradition to paint herself as the righteous matriarch and me as the cautionary tale. Andre saw it in my face. "What are you thinking?" he asked carefully. "I've been patient," I said, my voice low. "I've set boundaries. I've kept her secret, but she's still swinging that fake crown around like it's real gold." I looked up at him. "You said secrets rot the house from the inside out. Your father was right. I'm done living in rot." "You want to confront her?" he asked. "Yes," I said. but not screaming on a street corner, on her turf, in the light. No more whisper campaigns. He swallowed. At church? At her little women's luncheon, I said. Jasmine says they're doing another one next week, celebrating godly motherhood. She always goes, she always speaks, she's going to drag me again. I promise you. And this time, I'm going to be sitting in the back, listening. His eyes widened. Tasha, those women, that's like her kingdom. She's been building that reputation for years. If you stand up in there, I'm not going to stand up and wave the test around, I cut in. I'm not going to humiliate your father, but I am done letting her use her platform to crucify me. I'm going to tell the truth, calmly, clearly. Then I'm going to walk out. He studied me for a long moment. You really want to do this? Your mother said I wasn't good enough for her son in her own dining room, I said. She questioned my baby's right to exist in her bloodline in front of you. Then she took that lie to her friends, her church, her social circle. I took a breath. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life avoiding places because she's built a fan club of people who only know her version of the story. A slow, grim resolve settled over his face. Then we do it together, he said. You're not walking into that den alone. The following Saturday, I pulled on my calmest armor. A simple navy dress, gold hoops, my hair in a twist out that framed my face like a halo I did not feel. My belly, now unmistakable under the fabric, moved in slow rolls as if the baby were turning to listen. You ready? Andre asked, straightening his tie. No, I said honestly, but I'm going anyway. The church fellowship hall looked like every black church multi-purpose room in the South. Folding tables dressed up with white cloths and fake crystal, pitchers of sweet tea sweating onto napkins, pastel balloons clustered in the corners. Women milled around in their Sunday best, perfume and gossip hanging in the air. Heads turned when we walked in. Not all of them recognized me, but they recognized him. Deacon Coleman's son, the good one. I saw the flicker of recognition on a few faces who'd seen me before at holiday services. The subtle widening of eyes that said, oh, that's the wife. She saw us last. She was at the front of the room near the podium, laughing too loudly at something one of the ladies said, basking in the kind of attention that had always been her drug. When her gaze landed on us, her smile froze. What are you doing here? She hissed when we got close enough, her voice a shade lower than polite. We came to support the godly mothers, I said evenly. That's what this is, right? Her eyes flashed. This is not the place for drama. Then maybe you shouldn't have brought my name into it last week, I said quietly. Color rose in her cheeks. I don't know what lies you've heard. Andre stepped in. Mom, not today. The program's starting. As if on cue, one of the ushers tapped a microphone and called everyone to their seats. We sat near the back, close enough to see everything, far enough that no one would mistake me for wanting the spotlight. The program went as expected. A praise dance, a poem about mothers, a young woman singing His Eyes on the Sparrow. I almost forgot why we were there until the MC smiled toward the front. And now, she said, we'll hear a few words from one of our longest-serving mothers of the church, Sister Coleman. She has some wisdom to share about raising godly sons in a wicked world. Of course. She glided up to the podium, Bible in hand, back straight, her face composed in that holy mask she wore so well. Praise the Lord, saints, she began. When I look at my son, I see the fruit of a righteous legacy. I sat very still as she talked. I say talked, but it was preaching really, about sacrifice and prayer and protecting your family from the spirits of deceit. I listened to her talk about choosing wisely for our sons and guarding the bloodline God entrusted to us. Every word was another match she struck against the truth sitting in my purse. Finally, she said it. And that is why, she continued, voice swelling, when outside influences try to attach themselves to your child, people who do not understand our standards, our heritage, you must stand firm. You must demand proof. God is not the author of confusion. The room hummed with murmurs of agreement. My hands were shaking, but not with fear. With clarity. I rose to my feet. Chairs creaked as heads turned. A wave of whispers rolled through the room. "And sometimes," I said, my voice carrying more than I expected in the microphoneless quiet, "when you demand proof, God gives you more truth than you asked for." Every eye swung to me, including hers. She stared, stunned, as I walked calmly down the side aisle to the edge of the front row. I didn't go all the way up. I didn't take her podium. I just stepped where everyone could see both of us. "Some of you know me," I said. "Some of you have only heard stories." A ripple of awkward chuckles. "I'm Tasha," I continued. "I'm the woman Sister Coleman is talking about, even if she won't say my name. I'm her son's wife. I'm carrying his child. And yes, we did a DNA test, at her insistence. You could have heard a pin drop. The result was clear," I went on. "The baby is his. There is no confusion. There is no trap. My integrity is not in question." I could feel her seething beside me, but she couldn't stop me without confirming every ugly thing I was implying. "But here's the thing about asking God to shine a light," I said softly. "He doesn't just shine it where you point. He shines it everywhere." I reached into my bag, not for the report, but for the folded pamphlet the genetic counselor had given us. I held it up, not close enough for anyone to read, just enough to make the point. "When we did that test," I said, "we didn't just learn about my baby. We learned about this family. We learned that bloodlines are not always what people think they are, that the story you've been told your whole life might not match the story written in your cells." A murmur rippled. I saw a few faces glance at her. "I'm not here to expose anybody's sin," I said. "That's between them and God. I'm not here to shame anyone who made a mistake 30 years ago. I am here to say this. If you are going to use God and legacy and blood as weapons against other women, you better make sure your own house is clean first." Her lips parted. "How dare you?" "No, ma'am," I said, turning to look at her fully. "How dare you stand here and question my worth, my child, my marriage, when you know there are things in your own story you've never had the courage to tell the truth about?" She opened her mouth again, but another voice cut through. "Enough." It was quieter than I expected, but the authority in it was like thunder. Her husband stood at the back of the room. I hadn't even seen him come in. He walked slowly down the center aisle, eyes going from her to Andre to me. "James," she stammered, "what are you—" "You told me this was a prayer breakfast," he said, his gaze steady. "You didn't tell me you were turning our private shame into a public performance." A collective gasp. Color drained from her face. For once, she had no ready scripture, no rehearsed line. "James, we have both made mistakes," he said quietly. "But I will not stand by while you tear this girl down to prop yourself up. Not anymore." He looked at me then, and in his eyes, I saw something I had never seen from either of them before. Respect. "I'm sorry, Tasha," he said, "for what she said, for what I didn't stop. You didn't deserve that." My throat burned. I managed a nod. He turned back to the room. "Whatever you may have heard about my daughter-in-law," he announced, "you can forget it. The matter is settled. That is my son's child. That is my family. And anyone who can't accept that can mind their own business." Andre exhaled like he'd been underwater. His mother looked like the ground had opened beneath her feet. She stared at her husband, at the room, at me, realizing, maybe for the first time, that the script she'd written for everyone had slipped out of her hands. I didn't need to say another word. My revenge wasn't the DNA itself. It was this moment, watching a woman who'd built her throne on false purity finally stand in the same human mud as the rest of us. I turned, walked back up the aisle, Andre falling into step beside me. As we reached the doors, I felt dozens of eyes on my back, some shocked, some sympathetic, some thoughtful. I didn't need their approval. I had something better. My name, my baby, and a husband who for the first time had stepped fully onto my side of the line, even if it meant watching his mother's crown slip. Behind us, voices rose, some murmuring, some praying, some arguing. Her kingdom would survive or it wouldn't. It wasn't my job to care anymore. The rot had been named. Now it was up to them to tear out the infected beams. I had a new house to build. The funny thing about explosions is that the world doesn't stop after the blast. You still have to do the dishes. You still have to go to work. You still have to figure out what to make for dinner while your entire idea of family is lying in pieces on the floor. The week after the church luncheon, everything felt too quiet. No more late-night calls from unknown numbers. No more group texts with Bible verses that were really just weapons. No more passive-aggressive, just checking on the baby messages. Silence. On the outside, life moved forward. I finished up my last weeks at work, training the woman who would cover my maternity leave. Andre and I rearranged the apartment, building an IKEA crib that nearly ended our marriage more than his mother ever could. We picked paint colors. We argued about middle names. But underneath all of it, there was this raw, tender space where his family used to sit. One evening, about a month before my due date, we were folding baby onesies on the couch when he suddenly stopped and stared at the tiny clothes in his hands. "You ever feel guilty?" he asked quietly. "About what?" I said. He swallowed. "About all of it, about my mom, about what we did to her in there, exposing her like that." I set down the little yellow onesie I'd been smoothing. "Andre," I said carefully, "who exposed who? I didn't mention the affair. I didn't say the word DNA. I didn't tell those women anything your mama hadn't already told on herself, just from a different angle." He sighed, leaning back. "I know, it's just seeing her face when my dad spoke up. She looked small." "She made herself small the moment she tried to make me smaller," I said. "She could have stopped this at any point. She could have apologized. She could have told the truth. She could have just left us alone. She chose a stage, remember? I just stopped letting her be the only one with a microphone." He sat with that for a second. Then he nodded. "You're right," he said. "I'm just unlearning 30 years of honor your mother they never expected me to apply to my wife too." We were still finding our footing, him and me. There were nights when he woke up sweating because he dreamed that the test had proved his mother right after all. There were mornings when I flinched passing a church because my brain had started to associate steeples with judgment. But slowly, a new rhythm formed. His dad started coming by on Saturdays, never staying long, always bringing something small, an extra pack of diapers, some fruit, a tiny pair of baby socks. He clearly had no idea how to buy, but had tried anyway. He never badmouthed his wife. He never pushed us to reconcile. He just showed up. "I'm trying to do better with this generation than I did with the last," he said one afternoon, watching Andre paint the nursery. "I can't fix what happened, but I can be present now." I believed him. I didn't trust easily anymore, but I believed him. His mother, on the other hand, stayed distant. Until the day my water broke. It was a Tuesday. I was halfway through a bowl of cereal and an episode of some home renovation show when suddenly the couch felt wrong, wet. "Either my bladder gave up," I said, staring at the spreading damp, "or this baby just RSVP'd. 3 frantic hours, 1 misplaced hospital bag, and about 17 deep breaths later, I was in a delivery room, strapped to monitors, clutching Andre's hand like it was the last stable thing in the world. Labor was a blur of pain and time, stretching and contracting, like the contractions themselves. At some point, the nurse dimmed the lights. At some point, my hair scarf came off and I didn't care. At some point, I screamed that I was never doing this again, and Andre wisely did not respond. And then, Suddenly, and forever, there she was, our daughter. She came out angry and loud and absolutely perfect, a little brown fist already clenched, like she'd heard every word her grandmother ever said about her, and was ready to fight back. They put her on my chest, and the world snapped into a new shape. "You did it," Andre whispered, his forehead pressed to mine. "You did it, Tasha." For the first time in months, I cried without shame. Later, after they'd cleaned us both up, and the room had settled into that weird hospital quiet, there was a soft knock on the door. I thought it was a nurse. It wasn't. His father stepped in first, hat in his hand like he was entering a sacred space. "I know visiting hours are over," he said softly, but I begged the nurse. Told her I just needed 30 seconds. Behind him, half hidden in the hallway light, was his wife. She looked older. Not just tired. Older. The kind of older that comes when all the illusions you've wrapped around yourself burn off, and you're left standing in nothing but your own choices. Her eyes went straight to the bassinet. Is that her?" she whispered. Something twisted in my chest. Andre stiffened beside me. "Mama, I know I don't have the right," she blurted. "I know I have said terrible things. I have done terrible things. I just wanted to—" Her voice broke. "I wanted to see my granddaughter, once, before y'all decide what to do about me." The old me, the one from before all this, would have melted at that. I would have rushed to offer comfort, to smooth it over, to make it easier for everyone else. The new me, the mother me, thought of that day at her dining table, the way her words had sliced through me. The nights I'd lain awake touching my belly, wondering if my child would be welcomed or weighed and measured and found wanting. I looked at my daughter, asleep, utterly unconcerned with human drama, her tiny chest rising and falling. I wasn't just making a decision for me anymore. I was setting the tone for her whole life. "You can come in," I said finally. "But we're going to be clear about some things." His mother stepped fully into the room, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Clear about what?" she asked. "About who this child is," I said. "About who I am. About what kind of words will and will not ever be spoken around her." She swallowed. "Okay." I nodded toward the bassinet. "This is Amara," I said. "She is not a mistake God had to verify. She is not a stain on your bloodline. She is not barely good enough for anyone. She is a whole person made on purpose. If you are going to be in her life, even a little, you will speak about her and about me with respect, in public and in private. No more backhanded comments, no more jokes, no more using the Bible like a knife when what you really have is insecurity." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You have your father's tongue," she muttered to Andre, "but your grandmother's backbone." She shuffled closer, stopping a safe distance from the bed. "May I?" she asked, looking from me to the bassinet and back. I studied her. I thought about all the women in that church hall who'd clapped when she weaponized purity and legacy. I thought about the look on her face when her husband said private shame. I thought about how long it had taken her to get here. Then I thought about my daughter, who would grow up in a world that would try 100 different ways to tell her she was too loud, too black, too much, not enough. Maybe my revenge didn't need to be slamming every door. Maybe the real revenge was letting my child see me choose my own boundaries, not the ones fear handed me. "You can see her," I said. "You can hold her for a minute. Andre will stand right there. And after that, we're going to take things one day at a time. You will earn your way back in, slowly, by your actions, not your speeches." She nodded like a woman hearing a sentence. That was exactly what it was. She walked to the bassinet and looked down. I watched her face soften, something raw and unguarded passing through her features. "Oh," she breathed. "She looks like—" "Her damn self," I said gently. "She looks like Amara." A small, unexpected laugh slipped out of her. She glanced at me, then back at the baby. "May I, Andre?" she asked. He picked Amara up carefully and transferred her into his mother's arms. His hands hovered, ready to take her back at the slightest sign of anything. His mother held my daughter like she was holding a live confession. "I am so sorry," she whispered. Not to me, not to Andre, but to the 7-pound truth she'd spent months trying to deny. "For everything people like me ever said about girls like you before you even got here. I didn't say I forgive you. I wasn't there yet. But I also didn't snatch my baby away. I let the moment exist." Later, when they left, his father squeezing my shoulder, his mother promising nothing but "I'll try," Andre sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the closed door. "What are you thinking?" I asked. He took my hand. "I'm thinking that for the first time in my life, my mama had to play by somebody else's rules, and it was yours." He smiled, tired but real. "That's what I call justice." As the weeks turned into months, our little world rearranged itself around Amara. His mother came around cautiously. Sometimes she slipped, almost letting one of those old, sharp comments escape, then catching herself. Sometimes she backslid, and we sent her home early. But every time the power was on our side of the door. She'd spent decades believing she was the gatekeeper of who was and wasn't good enough for her family. Now she had to ring the bell and wait to be let in. That was my revenge. Not screaming, not public humiliation. Just this, the quiet, undeniable rearranging of who got to define worth in this story. One night, months later, I stood in the doorway of Amara's room, watching her sleep in the soft glow of the nightlight. Her tiny chest rose and fell, her little fingers twitching like she was dreaming of holding on to something. Andre wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You okay?" he murmured into my neck. I nodded. "You know what's wild?" I said, "All that talk about bloodlines and legacy and good enough. And the only thing that really mattered in the end was what kind of home we built for her." He kissed my cheek. "Then let's make sure it's one where she never has to cry in a bathroom because somebody told her she didn't belong." I looked at our daughter, our legacy, the girl who would grow up hearing the true story, not just of how her grandmother tried to erase her, but of how her mother refused to disappear. "I think," I said softly, "we're already doing it." Because in the end, the DNA test wasn't the real twist. The real twist was this. The woman who said I wasn't good enough for her son had to stand there and watch me teach her son, her husband, and her whole community what good enough actually looks like. And I did it without ever letting their shame become my inheritance.